There is belief, and then there is skepticism. Between the two lies a vast territory of questions and the unknown. What if reality is far more complex than we have been willing to perceive? What if the stories we dismissed as myth and legend hold the keys to understanding consciousness? From ghostly encounters to inexplicable lights in the sky, humanity has always sensed there was something more out there. Some call it paranormal, and others call it the divine. Some look to the stars for answers, while others search within. Philosophy asks, why? Theology asks, who? Science asks, how? And we ask ourselves, what if? We stand at the meeting point, a place where the veil between realities is thinner than you might think. This is the crossroads of the veil. We explore a prophecy at the very heart of one of the world's oldest institutions, allegedly foretelling the destiny of every pope and leading to one ultimate terrifying figure, Peter the Roman. A figure whose reign, it is said, will herald the destruction of Rome itself, and perhaps the end of all things. This isn't just a quaint historical footnote or a dusty relic of medieval superstition. This is a living, breathing enigma that resurfaces with every papal election, a source of fervent belief for some, and a chilling premonition for others. It's a narrative steeped in claims of divine vision, accusations of elaborate forgery, and a persistent, unsettling connection to the end times. So, dim the lights, settle in, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew. We're about to peel back the layers of history, theology, and paranormal speculation. We'll confront the evidence, explore the chilling connections to other apocalyptic warnings, and stare into the abyss of what this prophecy might truly mean. This is a journey into the heart of fear, the allure of the forbidden, and the enduring human quest to understand our ultimate fate. This is the prophecy of the popes. Part 1. The Final Pope and the Fall of Rome. Imagine, if you will, a hidden manuscript penned by a saint in the dim light of the 12th century, a vision so potent, so terrifying, it was allegedly locked away in the Vatican's deepest archives for nearly 500 years. A document that doesn't just hint at the future, but lays out a chilling roadmap, pope by pope, leading to a final, cataclysmic conclusion. This isn't the opening scene of a thriller novel, though it certainly has all the hallmarks. This is the core claim of the prophecy of the popes, attributed to Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop. And the final entry in this prophetic list is what has seized the imagination and stoked the fears of generations. It speaks of a figure known only as Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. The words themselves, even in translation, carry an undeniable weight, a sense of dreadful finality. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations, and when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. Let those words sink in. Final persecution. Many tribulations. The city of 7 hills, universally understood to be Rome, the eternal city, the very seat of the papacy for millennia, will be destroyed. And then the dreadful judge. The end. Not the end of a chapter, not the end of an era, but simply finis, the end. This isn't some vague, easily dismissed piece of folklore. This prophecy has been scrutinized, debated, and reinterpreted with every papal succession, especially as the list of popes has dwindled, bringing Petrus Romanus ever closer to our own time. With the recent passing of popes, who have been linked to the mottos immediately preceding this final ominous figure, the question hangs heavy in the air, a palpable sense of foreboding. Are we on the cusp of witnessing this ultimate prophecy unfold? Could the next pope, or a pope in the very near future, be this Peter the Roman? The implications are staggering. If true, it suggests a divinely ordained countdown to an apocalyptic climax, a period of unparalleled suffering for one of the world's largest religious institutions, and the obliteration of a city that has stood as a beacon of civilization for nearly 3,000 years. It speaks of a final judgment, an event that resonates with the deepest eschatological fears and hopes embedded in the human psyche. But what if it's not true? What if this chilling prophecy is something else entirely? A masterfully crafted deception from a bygone era? A piece of political propaganda designed to sway an ancient election? Or perhaps something even more unsettling, a text whose true purpose and origin remain shrouded in a mystery that continues to defy easy answers? The allure of Petrus Romanus is undeniable. The name itself evokes the very foundation of the papacy, Saint Peter, the first pope, the rock upon which the Church was built. To have a Peter the Roman as the final pope carries an almost unbearable symbolic weight. Is it a promise of a shepherd who will guide his flock through the ultimate storm, or a harbinger of a catastrophic betrayal from within? This is the precipice upon which we stand as we begin our investigation. The final, terrifying vision of Peter the Roman and the fall of Rome is the hook that has drawn countless souls into the labyrinth of the prophecy of the popes. It's a vision that demands answers, that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about faith, history, and the very nature of prophecy itself. And as we delve deeper, you'll find that the mystery only intensifies, the shadows lengthen, and the sense of an approaching unknown destiny becomes ever more acute. Stay with us as the veil begins to lift. Part 2. Unveiling St. Malachy's alleged vision. To understand the chilling prophecy of Petrus Romanus, we must first journey back in time, not just to its dramatic conclusion, but to its alleged origins, to the figure of a 12th-century Irish saint and the mysterious circumstances under which this extraordinary list of papal destinies supposedly came into being. The man at the heart of this enigma is St. Malachy, born in 1094. He was no obscure hermit, no fringe mystic. Malachy was a towering figure in the Irish Church, the Archbishop of Armagh, a renowned reformer who worked tirelessly to align the somewhat independent Irish ecclesiastical practices with those of Rome. He was a man of considerable influence, known for his piety, his administrative zeal, and, according to his contemporaries, his gift of miracles. He was, in fact, the first native-born Irish saint to be officially canonized. The traditional story, the one that has been passed down through centuries, claims that during a visit to Rome in the year 1139, St. Malachy was granted a profound and startling vision. As he stood in the heart of the Eternal City, it is said that the future of the papacy unfurled before his spiritual eyes. He saw, in a succession of symbolic glimpses, every pope who would reign from the then current incumbent, Pope Innocent II, or his immediate successor, Celestine II, elected in 1143, all the way to the very end of the papal line. According to this narrative, Malachy meticulously recorded these visions, not as lengthy descriptions, but as a series of 112 short, cryptic Latin phrases, mottos, if you will. Each motto was intended to encapsulate some defining characteristic of a future pope or his reign. It might allude to his family name, his birthplace, his coat of arms, a significant pre-papal title, or even a pivotal event that would mark his time as the Vicar of Christ. Imagine the scene. Saint Malachy, perhaps overwhelmed by the weight of this revelation, presenting this extraordinary document to Pope Innocent II. The Pope, upon seeing this prophetic timeline, is said to have been so struck by its implications, perhaps even by its potentially unsettling nature, that he ordered the manuscript to be deposited within the Vatican's secret archives. And there, according to legend, it lay hidden, a forgotten secret for over 4.5 centuries, a ticking clock counting down the popes unknown to the wider world. This is the foundational narrative, a saintly vision, a secret document, a hidden timeline of the papacy. The prophecy itself, as it eventually emerged, consists of these 112 Latin mottos. They are often just 2 or 3 words long. For example, ex castro Tiberis, from a castle on the Tiber; inimicus expulsus, enemy expelled; lilium et rosa, the lily and the rose. Each one, a tiny enigmatic puzzle piece, supposedly corresponding to a specific pontiff in the long line of St. Peter's successors. The list progresses chronologically, pope by pope, until it reaches its 112th entry. And then, after this final motto, comes the extended, unnumbered passage we've already encountered, the chilling description of Petrus Romanus, and the apocalyptic events that accompany his reign. Some counts, as we'll explore, suggest this final passage is actually the 113th distinct prophetic item, a point of textual nuance that could have significant interpretive consequences. The very nature of these mottos is key to the prophecy's enduring mystery and its controversial history. Their brevity and symbolism allow for, and indeed necessitate, interpretation. And it is in these interpretations, in the attempts to match the cryptic Latin phrases to the complex realities of papal lives and reigns, that much of the debate and fascination lies. This prophecy, then, is not a straightforward narrative like some biblical prophecies. It's a list, a sequence, a coded countdown. It presents the history of the papacy not as a series of contingent events, but as a preordained succession, marching inexorably towards a dramatic foretold conclusion. The power of such a claim is immense. If genuine, it would imply a level of divine insight into the future of one of the world's most enduring institutions that is simply staggering. It would mean that for centuries the destiny of each pope was, in some symbolic way, already written. But this is where the story takes its first sharp, unsettling turn. For as compelling as the tale of St. Malachy's vision might be, the historical record surrounding its emergence is fraught with questions. With silences so profound, they scream louder than any written word. The journey of this prophecy from a supposed 12th century vision to its explosive entry onto the world stage in the late 16th century is a story in itself. A detective case spanning centuries, filled with missing evidence, suspicious coincidences, and the ever-present shadow of doubt. Before we delve into that historical labyrinth, it's crucial to grasp the sheer audacity of the prophecy's claim. A complete, albeit cryptic, list of future popes, culminating in an apocalyptic finale. This is the bedrock upon which all subsequent debate, fear, and fascination are built. A saint, a vision, and a list that purports to hold the key to centuries of papal destiny, right up to the very edge of the end times. Part 3. The 450-year silence and the shadow of Panvinio's ghost. We've established the dramatic claim. Saint Malachy, a 12th century Irish saint, receives a vision of all future popes, records them in 112 cryptic Latin mottos, and the manuscript is then locked away in the Vatican archives, unseen, unheard of, for nearly 500 years. It's a compelling story, the kind that legends are made of. But as any good investigator knows, it's often in the silences, the gaps in the narrative, that the most uncomfortable truths lie hidden. And the prophecy of the popes is surrounded by a silence so vast, so complete, it has become the central pillar in the argument that this entire prophetic edifice might be built not on divine revelation, but on a far more human, and perhaps far more cynical foundation: forgery. The prophecy, as we know it, bursts into the public consciousness in the year 1595. It appears within the pages of a weighty historical tome titled Lignum Vitae Ornamentum et Decus Ecclesiae, the Tree of Life, Ornament and Glory of the Church. The author of this extensive work on the history of the Benedictine order was a monk named Arnold Wion, born in 1554. It is Wion who claims to have discovered this long-lost manuscript of St. Malachy's prophecies. He asserts it had never been printed before, but that many were eager to see it. Think about that for a moment. A prophecy of such monumental significance, supposedly penned by a renowned saint, detailing the lineage of every pope until the end of time, lies dormant, forgotten, for over 4.5 centuries. Saint Malachy died in 1148. His life was meticulously documented by none other than his close friend and contemporary, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, himself a towering figure of the Church. Saint Bernard wrote extensively about Malachy, detailing his life, his reforms, his travels, even his alleged miracles. Yet, in all of Saint Bernard's writings, there is not a single solitary mention of Malachy ever having received such a vision, or having authored such a prophecy. This is not just an oversight, it's a gaping hole in the historical record. If Malachy had indeed produced a work of this magnitude, it is almost inconceivable that his closest biographer, a man dedicated to preserving his legacy, would have omitted it. This profound silence from St. Bernard is perhaps the single most damning piece of negative evidence against a 12th century origin. And it's not just St. Bernard. For 450 years, no historian, no theologian, no Vatican archivist, no one with an interest in prophetic material, and believe me, such interest was rife throughout the medieval and Renaissance periods, ever mentions the existence of this extraordinary document. Then, suddenly, around 1590, just 5 years before Wion's publication, it supposedly surfaces, conveniently rediscovered in the Vatican archives, just in time, some have noted, for a particularly contentious papal conclave. This lost and found manuscript narrative, while romantic, is a well-worn trope in the history of questionable texts. It's a convenient way to explain away a lack of earlier provenance, to lend an air of ancient authority to a document that might, in reality, be of much more recent vintage. From a historical critical perspective, such a story doesn't bolster claims of authenticity. It often raises red flags, aligning with works falsely attributed to an ancient worthy to grant them unearned authority. But the questions don't stop with the 450-year silence. When scholars began to dissect the prophecy itself, particularly after its 1595 publication, a truly startling pattern emerged. The mottos for the popes who reigned before 1595, that is, the popes whose histories were already known by the time the prophecy appeared, were often remarkably, uncannily accurate. The connections were clear, direct, sometimes even punningly clever. Let's look at a few examples that Wion himself, or his attributed interpreter, highlighted. Pope Celestine II, who reigned from 1143 to 1144, is given the motto Ex Castro Tuberis, from a castle on the Tiber. Celestine II, born Guido di Castello, hailed from Città di Castello, city of the castle, a town situated right on the banks of the Tiber River. A perfect fit. Pope Benedict XII, reigning from 1334 to 1342, received the motto Frigidus Abbas, cold abbot. Before his papacy, Benedict XII was the abbot of the monastery at Fontfroide, which literally translates to cold spring or cold fountain. Again, a strikingly specific connection. Or consider Pope Pius III, who reigned briefly in 1503. His motto is De Parvo Homine, from a small man. Pius III's family name was Piccolomini. This name is derived from the Italian words piccolo, small, and uomo, man. It's a direct, almost playful allusion to his lineage. These pre-1595 mottos often seem to function like clever historical summaries or allusions, the kind of things someone with access to papal histories and a bit of ingenuity could construct with the benefit of hindsight. Now, contrast this with the mottos for popes elected after the prophecy's publication in 1595. Suddenly, the clarity vanishes. The mottos become vague, obscure, almost frustratingly enigmatic. The connections, when they are made, often seem strained, forced, requiring considerable interpretive gymnastics to make them fit. Take Pope Benedict XIV, who reigned from 1740 to 1758. His motto is Animal Rurale, rustic animal or country animal. This is widely considered a bizarrely inaccurate description for Benedict XIV, who was Prospero Lambertini, a highly erudite scholar, a canon lawyer, a sophisticated urbanite educated in Rome from a young age, and an able administrator. He was anything but a simple country boy. Or Pope Pius VII, from 1800 to 1823, given the motto Aquila Rapax, rapacious eagle. Attempts to link this to Pius VII often resort to associating it with his powerful contemporary Napoleon Bonaparte, whose imperial symbol was the eagle and whose actions certainly impacted Pius VII's reign, including imprisoning him. But this makes the motto a description of an external figure, not the Pope himself, a common criticism leveled at many post-1595 interpretations. Even for a pope like Benedict V, whose reign, 1914 to 1922, coincided with the horrors of World War I and the rise of atheistic communism in Russia, the motto Religio depopulata, religion despoiled or religion laid waste, while seemingly fitting for the times, has no obvious direct connection to Benedict XV's name, family, origin, or coat of arms. It describes the era, perhaps, but not the man in the specific, almost biographical way the pre-1595 mottos often did. Trutits. This stark difference in accuracy, crystal clear before 1595, murky and ambiguous after, is a classic hallmark of what historians call Vaticinium ex eventu, prophecy after the event. It's a literary device where predictions for past events are written with full knowledge of how those events transpired, while genuine attempts to predict the future lack that convenient clarity. This pattern, more than almost any other internal feature of the text, screams 16th century forgery. The plot thickens further when we consider the political climate of the late 16th century. One prominent theory, proposed as early as the 17th century by the French priest Louis Moreri, suggests the prophecy was fabricated with a very specific political aim: to influence the papal conclave of 1590. This conclave was convened to elect a successor to Pope Urban VII, whose papacy lasted a mere 13 days. In the prophecy, the pope following Urban VII is given the motto, Ex antiquitate urbis, from the old city. As it happens, a leading candidate in that 1590 conclave was Cardinal Girolamo Simoncelli. And where was Simoncelli from? Orvieto, a city whose Latin name, Urbe Vetanum, literally means Old City. Could the prophecy have been crafted and circulated by Simoncelli's supporters in an attempt to suggest his election was divinely ordained? It's a tantalizing possibility, and one that fits the timeline perfectly. Simoncelli, by the way, was not elected. But perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence pointing to a 16th-century origin lies in the prophecy's textual DNA. Scholars, most notably the 19th-century priest M.J. O'Brien, have demonstrated strong, almost undeniable links between the prophecy of the popes and the historical works of an Italian historian named Onofrio Panvinio. Panvinio died in 1568, nearly 3 decades before Guion published the prophecy. His works, such as the Epitome Pontificum Romanorum, published in 1557, and his later lavishly illustrated Accurate Effigies Pontificum Maximorum, provided detailed biographies of popes, and, crucially, documented their coats of arms. The prophecy of the popes shows an uncanny correspondence with Panvinio's work. The mottos often seem to be direct allusions to the papal coats of arms, as described or depicted by Panvinio. Even more tellingly, the prophecy replicates errors found in Panvinio's histories. If the prophecy was drawing from Panvinio, it must have been written after 1557, and likely used Panvinio as a primary sourcebook for constructing the accurate pre-1590 mottos. This textual dependency is like finding modern fingerprints on an allegedly ancient artifact. And what of Alphonsus Diaconius, or Alfonso Chacon, the respected Dominican scholar to whom Arnold Guion attributed the interpretations of the pre-1590 mottos in his Lignum Vitae? Even this attribution has come under fire. As early as 1694, the Jesuit scholar Claude-François Ménestrier argued that Diaconius was not the author of these interpretations, as they don't appear in Diaconius's known works, or among his listed writings. If Guion was mistaken, or perhaps even misleading, about who provided the interpretations, it naturally casts a shadow of doubt on his claims about the origin of the prophecy manuscript itself. The weight of this evidence, the deafening silence for 450 years, the glaring disparity in accuracy between early and later mottos, the specific political context of 1590, and the textual fingerprints of Onofrio Panvinio all over the pre-1595 entries, has led the overwhelming majority of historians and critical scholars to a stark conclusion. The prophecy of the popes is not a divine revelation from the 12th century. It is, almost certainly, a clever, sophisticated, and remarkably successful forgery from the late 16th century. But to label it a forgery is not to dismiss its power or its mystery. In fact, it deepens it. Who was the true author or authors? What were their ultimate motives? And how did a text, likely born of human ingenuity and perhaps political ambition, come to exert such a profound and lasting hold on the popular imagination, fueling centuries of eschatological fear and speculation? The evidence for forgery is strong, but the story of the prophecy and its journey into the heart of apocalyptic expectation is far from over. The rising tide of doubt was just the beginning. The true climax of this prophetic drama still lay in its final, terrifying words. Part 4. The Last Pope. Rome burns, deciphering the ultimate warning. We stand now at the precipice, the culmination of this century's spanning prophetic list. All the mottos, all the popes, whether accurately predicted through hindsight or vaguely alluded to in cryptic verse, lead to this one final earth-shattering pronouncement. This is the prophecy that has caused theologians to argue, historians to debate, and believers to tremble for generations. This is Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. Let us revisit the full, chilling text as it first appeared in Arnold Guion's Lignum Vitae, In 1595, the passage that follows the 112th motto, the passage that has become the focal point of so much apocalyptic dread. Translated into English, it delivers its stark message: in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. And when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. The sheer weight of these words is immense. Final persecution. This isn't just another period of difficulty for the Church. It's the ultimate trial, the last great assault. And presiding over this, or perhaps enduring it, is Petrus Romanus, a name that resonates with the very origins of the papacy: Peter, the first apostle, the rock, and Romanus, linking him inextricably to the city that has been the See of Peter for 2 millennia. Whereat he will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. This speaks of a shepherd guiding his flock through immense suffering, a time of profound crisis and hardship. And then, the cataclysm. Quibus transactus civitas septicolis diruitur. And when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed. There is no ambiguity here. The city of 7 hills is, and always has been, Rome. The prophecy foretells its utter destruction. Imagine the Colosseum crumbling, St. Peter's Basilica in ruins, the historic heart of Western civilization obliterated. And as if that weren't enough, the prophecy concludes, Judex tremendus judicabit populum suum, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. This is the last judgment, the ultimate divine reckoning that stands at the end of Christian eschatological belief. And finally, that single, stark word, finis, the end. Now, a crucial point of textual structure, one often overlooked in popular retellings, but vital for careful interpretation, lies in that very first line. In persecution extrema, SRE sedibit. In Wion's original 1595 publication, this line often appears as a separate sentence, perhaps even its own distinct paragraph, before the introduction of Petrus Romanus. This grammatical separation is not trivial. It opens the door to a startling possibility: that one or more unlisted popes could reign between the pope associated with the 111th motto, the one before the Gloria Olivae motto, which itself is the 111th if Petrus Romanus is the 112th distinct prophetic statement, or the 112th if Petrus Romanus is an epilogue, and the actual arrival of Petrus Romanus. If this interpretation holds, then the prophecy does not necessarily state that Petrus Romanus is the immediate successor to the Pope of Gloria Olivae, widely linked by interpreters to Pope Benedict XVI. This detail is a game-changer for those trying to pinpoint the prophecy's fulfillment in our time. It means the arrival of Peter the Roman could be deferred, potentially indefinitely, beyond the pontificate of Pope Francis or any immediate successor. This textual ambiguity provides the prophecy with an almost uncanny resilience, an ability to evade definitive falsification. Nevertheless, the Gloria Olivae Pope, for many interpreters, speculation has been white-hot. Could Francis be, or have been, this prophesied Peter the Roman? Proponents of this link have grasped at various threads. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, chose his papal name in honor of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Francis of Assisi's father. His name was Pietro Bernardone, Peter. Furthermore, Pope Francis, though Argentinian by birth, is of Italian heritage, thus symbolically, if not literally, Roman. However, most scholars and critical commentators view these connections as tenuous at best. His baptismal name is Jorge, not Peter. He is not Roman by birth or primary cultural identity in the way the motto might traditionally imply. And, as we've noted, the prophecy's structure may not even demand an immediate succession. But the power of the Petrus Romanus prophecy transcends the debate over any single pope. Its true impact lies in its vivid, terrifying depiction of the end times. The many tribulations, the destruction of Rome, the last judgment. These are not mere footnotes. They are the central, horrifying pillars of this final, prophetic utterance. They align the prophecy of the popes squarely with the most dramatic and feared narratives of Christian apocalyptic literature, particularly the Book of Revelation, which also speaks of the judgment of a great corrupt city, often identified with Rome under the guise of Babylon the Great, and a final, divine settling of accounts. It is here, in this apocalyptic crucible, that the prophecy of the popes ignites the most fervent paranormal and esoteric interpretations. Authors like Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam, in their widely read book Petrus Romanus, "The Final Pope is Here," seize upon this figure. For them, and for many in these circles, Petrus Romanus is not just the last pope, but the false prophet spoken of in the Book of Revelation, a malevolent religious leader who will deceive humanity, usher in a great apostasy, and pave the way for the reign of the Antichrist. These interpretations often weave the Malachy prophecy into a vast tapestry of global conspiracy theories. They speak of secret societies, the Illuminati, Masonic orders, infiltrating the Catholic Church, of sinister forces working behind the scenes to install this final, treacherous pope. They hint at suppressed ancient knowledge, hidden codices within the Vatican that supposedly confirm these apocalyptic scenarios. This is where the prophecy moves beyond theological debate and historical analysis into the shadowy realms of speculative, often conspiratorial eschatology, where every global event, every papal pronouncement, is scrutinized for signs of the approaching end. The Petrus Romanus prophecy, therefore, stands as the terrifying climax of this centuries-old enigma. Its explicit references to final persecution, the obliteration of Rome, and the Last Judgment make it irresistibly potent for anyone grappling with the anxieties of the end times. The name itself, Peter the Roman, is a masterstroke of symbolic resonance, hearkening back to the Church's very foundation, while simultaneously pointing towards its ultimate, cataclysmic dissolution. Whether one views it as the authentic words of a 12th century saint, the dramatic flourish of a 16th century forger, or a coded message for initiates of hidden knowledge, its impact is undeniable. It forces a confrontation with the idea of an ultimate end, a final chapter for humanity and its institutions. And it is this confrontation, this staring into the abyss of the unknown, that gives the prophecy its enduring, chilling power. The question of its origin might be debated, but the fear it evokes, the sense of an impending, world-altering event, remains terrifyingly real for many. The climax of the prophecy is not just a prediction. It's a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties about the future and the ultimate fate that awaits us all. Part 5. The Web of Prophecy, Beyond Malachy. Papal Destinies in the Visions of Mystics and Seers. The prophecy of the popes, with its stark vision of Petrus Romanus and the end of days, does not exist in a vacuum. It is, rather, a particularly vivid thread in a much larger, more ancient tapestry of prophetic traditions, especially within Catholicism, that concern themselves with the fate of the papacy, the trials of the Church, and the unfolding of eschatological events. To truly grasp the context and the enduring resonance of Malachy's alleged predictions, we must now broaden our gaze, exploring other voices, other visions that have echoed similar themes of crisis, suffering, and ultimate divine reckoning centered around the figure of the Pope. Imagine the 12th century, the very era in which Saint Malachy lived. It was a time of profound spiritual ferment, of crusades, of burgeoning scholasticism, and of powerful mystical voices. Two of Malachy's contemporaries stand out: Joachim of Fiore and Saint Hildegard of Bingen. Joachim of Fiore, a Cistercian abbot from Calabria, Italy, was a figure of immense influence, whose eschatological ideas would ripple through centuries of apocalyptic thought. While a collection of papal prophecies known as the Vaticania Pontificum, papal prophecies, was historically attributed to him, modern scholarship often points to a pseudo-Joachim, a later compiler working in his spirit. These prophecies, unlike Malachy's concise mottos, are often elaborate, symbolic, and deeply enigmatic, frequently accompanied by allegorical illustrations. They depict a succession of popes, some good, some evil, some deeply conflicted, navigating a church in turmoil. This is the final beast, terrible in aspect, who shall draw down the stars from the heavens, language that plunges us directly into the cosmic imagery of the Book of Revelation. Joachim's prophecies are less about identifying individual popes and more about interpreting the spiritual state of the Church and the papacy within a grand, unfolding divine plan, a plan he famously structured into 3 ages of history: the age of the Father, the Son, and the coming age of the Holy Spirit, which he believed was imminent, possibly around the year 1260. Then there is Saint Hildegard of Bingen, the German Benedictine abbess, a true polymath, visionary, theologian, composer, naturalist. Canonized and declared a doctor of the Church, Hildegard was no gentle mystic content with quiet contemplation. Her visions, recorded in monumental works like Civius, Know the Ways, were often powerful, pointed critiques of the Church of her day, including its highest leadership. Some scholarly analyses suggest Hildegard harbored a prophetic rejection of the papacy's ultimate authority, and even prophesied its ending. This wasn't necessarily a prediction of the Church's total annihilation, but perhaps a radical transformation or decline of papal power, born from her deep dismay at the corruption and abuse of power she perceived. For a canonized saint and doctor of the Church to voice such profound concerns about the papacy itself adds a complex layer to our understanding of how prophetic critique has functioned within the Catholic tradition. Fast forward several centuries, and the prophetic pulse continues to beat. The 20th century brought us the famed apparitions at Fatima, Portugal, in 1917. 3 shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, reported visions of the Virgin Mary. 7 who entrusted them with what became known as the 3 secrets. These messages are undeniably eschatological. The first secret was a terrifying vision of hell. The second predicted the end of World War I, but warned of a worse one if humanity did not repent, and spoke of Russia spreading her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. It called for the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, promising that, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The third secret, kept under wraps by the Vatican until the year 2000, is perhaps the most relevant to our discussion of papal prophecy. It describes a symbolic vision. A bishop dressed in white, whom the children sensed was the Holy Father, leading a procession through a big city half in ruins, afflicted with pain and sorrow. Atop a steep mountain, by a large cross, this pope is killed by soldiers, as are many other bishops, priests, and lay people with him. The Vatican's official interpretation, provided by then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, links this vision to the immense suffering of the popes and the Church throughout the 20th century, a century scarred by devastating wars, totalitarian persecution, and widespread martyrdom. Pope John Paul II, who survived an assassination attempt on May 13th, the anniversary of the first Fatima apparition, deeply believed his own suffering was connected to this prophecy. Fatima, then, brings the theme of papal suffering into a more modern, historical context, emphasizing a call to conversion and penance in the face of very real, experienced tribulations. Then there are the controversial and unapproved apparitions at San Sebastian de Garabandal, Spain, between 1961 and 1965. 4 young schoolgirls claimed to receive messages from the Virgin Mary and Saint Michael the Archangel. These messages are laden with specific dramatic prophecies, a global warning, an interior illumination where every soul will see its state before God, a great miracle to occur at Garabandal within a year of the warning, a permanent supernatural sign to convert the world, and, if humanity fails to heed these signs, a terrible chastisement directly from God. The Garabandal messages also reportedly spoke of a limited number of popes remaining before the end of the times, not necessarily the end of the world, but a climactic era, and controversially claimed that many cardinals, bishops, and priests are following the road to perdition. The Catholic Church has consistently withheld approval from the Garabandal apparitions, with local bishops finding no supernatural foundation for the claims. Yet, Garabandal maintains a fervent following, its dramatic sequence of warning, miracle, and chastisement resonating deeply with apocalyptic expectations. And we cannot overlook Saint John Bosco, the 19th-century Italian priest and founder of the Salesian order, known for his prophetic dreams. His most famous vision, the prophecy of the 2 columns, recounted in 1862, is a powerful allegory. He saw the Church as a majestic flagship, commanded by the Pope, under relentless attack from a fleet of enemy ships representing persecutors and heresies. In the midst of this turmoil, 2 towering columns rise from the sea, one topped with a large Eucharistic host, inscribed Salvation of Believers, the other with a statue of the Immaculate Virgin Mary, inscribed Help of Christians. The Pope, after falling wounded and even dying, only to be immediately replaced by a successor, finally steers the flagship securely between these 2 columns, anchoring the Church to them. At this, the enemy fleet is thrown into chaos and destroyed, and a great calm descends. Don Bosco's prophecy is less about a timeline and more about spiritual guidance, emphasizing that the Church's safety and ultimate triumph in times of grave crisis depend on steadfast devotion to the Eucharist and to Mary. The suffering and succession of popes are central, but the focus is on spiritual resilience. These are but a few examples. The landscape of Catholic prophecy is rich with other mystics and seers, whose pronouncements have touched upon the future of the Church and the papacy. What emerges from this wider web of prophetic voices? Several common threads, several recurring symbols and anxieties that resonate with, and sometimes amplify, the themes found in the prophecy of the popes. Tribulation and persecution. A near universal expectation that the Church and its leadership will face severe trials. Divine judgment or intervention. A sense that history is moving towards a divine climax, whether a chastisement, a miracle, or a final judgment. Internal Church crisis. Warnings of corruption, apostasy, or doctrinal deviation from within the Church itself. The pivotal role of the Virgin Mary and the Eucharist. These are frequently presented as anchors of hope and means of perseverance. A call to penance, prayer, and conversion. an urgent plea for spiritual renewal as a response to impending or ongoing crises. The prophecy of the popes, therefore, with its Petrus Romanus, taps into this deep, flowing current of eschatological expectation. It gives a name, a finality, to a narrative of papal destiny that has been explored and reinterpreted by mystics and seers for centuries. But what does the institutional church itself make of these prophecies, particularly the one attributed to Saint Malachy? The official stance, or often the pointed lack thereof, is another crucial piece of this puzzle. The Catholic Church approaches private revelations with extreme caution. While approved apparitions like Fatima are deemed worthy of belief and can offer spiritual guidance, they are not considered part of the deposit of faith necessary for salvation. Unapproved claims, like Garabandal, are often met with official skepticism or outright rejection by local bishops, whose judgment the Vatican typically supports. And the prophecy of the popes? It has never received any form of official church approval. In fact, as we've seen, many Catholic theologians and scholars have actively dismissed it as a forgery, a piece of malarkey, to use a colloquial term. They point to the lack of historical evidence, the suspicious accuracy of its early predictions, and its often strained interpretations for later popes. Theologians also tend to emphasize the unknowability of the exact time of the end, cautioning against date-setting or relying on speculative prophecies for a roadmap to the Last Judgment. The Church's primary eschatological focus remains on Christ's life, death, and resurrection as the definitive divine act, and on the call to constant vigilance and faithful living, rather than on deciphering cryptic timelines. Yet, despite this scholarly and often theological dismissal, the prophecy of the popes, and particularly Petrus Romanus, endures. It thrives in the popular imagination, in the writings of paranormal investigators, in the anxious whispers that accompany every papal transition. This persistence, this refusal to fade away, despite the weight of critical evidence against its ancient authenticity, speaks volumes about its power as a cultural artifact, a symbol of enduring human anxieties about the future, the role of authority, and the ultimate destiny of our world. The web of prophecy is vast and complex, and Malachy's enigmatic list, whether divine insight or human invention, remains one of its most compelling and unsettling strands. Part 6. Forgery, Faith, and the Unquenchable Thirst for Foreknowledge. We've journeyed through the shadowy origins of the prophecy of the popes, wrestled with the compelling evidence of its 16th-century fabrication, stared into the apocalyptic abyss of Petrus Romanus, and explored its echoes in the wider chorus of Catholic eschatological thought. Now, we arrive at a crucial juncture, the resolution of this enduring enigma. But resolution, in this context, is not a simple declaration of truth or falsehood. It's an attempt to understand why this prophecy, despite the overwhelming scholarly consensus pointing to it as a forgery, continues to exert such a potent influence. Why it remains a source of fascination, fear, and fervent belief for so many. Let's be clear. The historical and textual evidence, when subjected to rigorous critical analysis, paints a fairly definitive picture. The 450-year silence between St. Malachy's death and the prophecy's first appearance in 1595 is a chasm that no lost manuscript theory can convincingly bridge. The stark disparity in accuracy between the pre-1595 mottos, eerily precise, and the post-1595 mottos, often vague and requiring contorted interpretations, strongly suggests the hand of a 16th-century author working with the benefit of hindsight. The classic Vaticinium ex eventu, the textual fingerprints of Onofrio Panvino's 1557 papal histories, including replicated errors and a shared focus on heraldry, further anchor the prophecy's composition to that later period. The potential political machinations surrounding the 1590 papal conclave offer a plausible, if not definitively proven, motive for its creation. From a purely academic, historical critical standpoint, the case for the prophecy of the popes being a work falsely attributed to Saint Malachy to lend it an air of ancient authority and divine inspiration is exceptionally strong. And yet, it persists. Petrus Romanus continues to be a name whispered with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Each papal election sees a flurry of attempts to match the new pontiff to the next motto on Malachy's list. Books are written, websites buzz, and paranormal investigators find fertile ground for elaborate theories connecting this final pope to global conspiracies, the Antichrist, and the imminent end of the world. Why? What is the enduring appeal of this disputed prophecy? Part of the answer lies in the very nature of prophecy itself, and in the deep-seated human desire for meaning, order, and a glimpse into the unknown future. In times of uncertainty, crisis, or rapid societal change, and let's face it, when are we not in such times, prophecies can offer a comforting, if sometimes terrifying, narrative framework. They suggest that events are not random, not chaotic, but part of a larger, perhaps divinely ordained plan. Even a prophecy foretelling doom can, paradoxically, reduce anxiety for some by providing a cognitive map, a sense that the future, however grim, is at least known on some level. The prophecy of the popes, with its linear progression of popes leading to a definitive apocalyptic end, taps directly into this need for structure and foreknowledge. Its cryptic mottos, especially the later, more ambiguous ones, are a masterstroke, intentional or not. Their vagueness allows for a remarkable degree of interpretive flexibility. Believers can engage in a constant process of reinterpretation, finding connections, however tenuous, that confirm their belief. This is the power of confirmation bias. We tend to see what we expect to see, to highlight the hits, and rationalize or ignore the misses. Furthermore, shared belief in a prophecy like Malachy's can foster a powerful sense of community and identity, particularly for groups that feel marginalized or possess knowledge they believe is ignored or suppressed by mainstream institutions. The prophecy of the popes, especially in its more conspiratorial interpretations, offers a secret history, an alternative narrative that can bind adherents together in a shared understanding of impending events. We must also acknowledge the challenge of integrating fundamentally different ways of knowing, different epistemologies. Academic scholarship operates on principles of empirical evidence, logical consistency, and critical analysis. Paranormal and spiritual perspectives, on the other hand, often value personal experience, intuition, revelatory claims, symbolic correspondence, and faith-based acceptance. What constitutes proof in one domain may be irrelevant or insufficient in the other, but to understand the multifaceted phenomenon of the prophecy's reception. The prophecy of the popes, therefore, has become more than just a historical text to be authenticated or debunked. It has evolved into a potent cultural symbol. Its cyclical testing with each new pope ensures its continued presence in public discourse. Each conclave breathes new life into it. Interpretations that seem to fit, however loosely, reinforce belief for some. Failures are explained away, or the ultimate fulfillment, especially of Petrus Romanus, is simply deferred to a future pontiff, thanks in part to that crucial textual ambiguity about intervening popes. This is the genius, or perhaps the accidental brilliance, of the prophecy's structure. It's almost unfalsifiable in the long run for those determined to believe. It has an indefinite shelf life. So, while the historian in us might confidently point to the evidence of a 16th-century origin, the cultural analyst must acknowledge the prophecy's enduring power as a living text, constantly reanimated by new interpretations and contemporary anxieties. It reflects our collective fascination with the what if, our enduring struggle with the mysteries of time and destiny, and our often unsettling relationship with institutions of power and authority. The questions his prophecy raises about the future, about faith, about the end of all things, will continue to haunt us, to challenge us, and to compel us to look for answers. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop seeking the truths that lie hidden in the shadows. As we step back from the crossroads, remember, the veil between the known and unknown is thinner than we think. But the story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. Because what we explore here is not just about the phenomena, but the journey that we are all on, searching for meaning and our purpose in life, seeking the knowledge and the wisdom to solve the deeper mysteries in our universe and to find and fulfill our destiny. Unexplained sightings, spirits, and science. They are all connected, and they have been interwoven into the grand tapestry of life. So remember, keep pulling at the threads, because this has been the crossroads of the veil.